episode of Inside the Recording Studio. I am Jody Whitesides, and with me is Mr. Chris Hellstrom. How are you today, Chris?
I am good, Jody. I am good. How about yourself?
I am suffering through allergies, and it's not a pleasant thing.
No, it is not. As a matter of fact, on a personal note, my doctor just prescribed me some allergy medication, so
I'm not as fancy as you when it comes to that.
Well, what can I tell you? This is how we do it in the big leagues.
Well, I better get on my big league pants then.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, but I know what you mean. It's a frustrating thing when you can't breathe properly or your eyes are watering and you're sneezing and all this kind of stuff. It's not pleasant.
You're hitting the nails right on the head right there. Anyway, let's jump right in to today's episode. We're going to be talking about active and passive pickups.
Yeah.
So,
other known as nerd stuff.
Nerd stuff, yes. The things that guitar players and bass players can nerd out on.
Absolutely. So I suppose we should start with just the construction of a pickup. So what the heck is a pickup, Jody?
What is a pickup? I'll tell you what a pickup is. A pickup is a combination of a few different things. One of them is magnetic poles. And they take those little magnetic poles and they stick them into this stuff and then they wrap wires around it. Am I close?
Yeah, the defined stuff. Yes, but you're absolutely right. There are magnetic poles, and these are usually ceramic or alnico or a couple of different types of alnico. These are then wound in usually, again, copper wire.
Yes, of varying sizes depending on what they want in an output.
Right.
And then varying amounts of winds as well, depending on the kind of output that they want too.
Yeah. Yeah. What this does is that the magnets then in turn, they magnetize the string that when you pluck it, it generates a current that is then gone through the copper wire and on through the electronics in your guitar. It comes out the other way on your amp as sound.
Yeehaw.
So it's essentially a combination here of copper wires and different types of magnets.
Right. And it doesn't matter if it's single coil or humbucker. They use the same sort of technology, especially in the passive world. There is a new up-and-coming, well, actually, it's not even up-and-coming. It's kind of already out, type of pickup for active pickups, but we'll get to that later.
Of course, like you alluded to there, the different types of winds and different types of magnetics, all those things naturally play a part into the sound of the pickup. So everybody has their own way of what they prefer, and that's why we end up with 5 million types of pickups that we can choose from, right?
Well, why don't we kick it off with the old school style, which is the initial style of pickups, which are known as passive pickups.
Yep.
Why would they be called passive?
There's no, I should say that there's no boosting of the signal anywhere. All you can do is you can transfer the energy that's generated by the pickup and you can subtract from that in the form of volume or tone control.
Sure.
But there is no boosting anything. What you get out is what you get out.
Okay.
That's the sort of traditional type of pickup that I think most people tend to think of when they think guitar pickups. And that's what's in, old Strats and Les Pauls and everything that you have, right? They tend to be passive pickups. So
one other thing that's interesting about passive pickups before we jump on to something else is that the volume knob will cause the pickup to change its character, change its tone, depending on where the volume knob is actually set. In addition to that, it would also have to do with the K rating. I don't know what the K stands for, but you can get like a 250K or a 500K pot. It's the pot rating and how much it opens up and allows sound through. And that, when it's not fully cranked wide open, which is where you're going to get the highest output of a passive pickup, when you bring it down, there are changes in the character to the tone of that pickup.
Yeah. Yes.
What are some of those changes?
Well, the main one is a loss of high end.
Sure.
You would get, obviously like you'd expect if you're just turning down the volume, it would obviously be a softer signal. but you will lose a little bit of top end.
Yeah.
And that's something that you see players do all the time. That certain playing style kind of goes into this, to be perfectly honest. But you see certain players adjusting their volume as they're playing to get those different tonal variations in their sound. So, go ahead.
Well, one other thing, too, about passive pickups in the early days, when things weren't quite so technologically advanced as they are now, there are stories of guys like Van Halen who were playing under such incredible amounts of volume from their amps that the pickups would squeal even if nothing was going on. And I'm not sure if it's Eddie that actually came up with it, but he decided to drop his pickups into a vat of boiling hot wax.
I've heard that as well. I've heard that the other players do the same thing, yeah.
Sure, and that was a technique in order for them to get rid of the squealing that was happening from the massive amounts of volume. In addition to the string causing the magnetic area to vibrate and translate into sound, if there were an insane amount of volume going through the thing from your amplifier, it would cause the tiny little wires in the pickup to actually vibrate in amongst themselves. And the potting of them with this boiling hot wax got in there to prevent the wires of the windings of the pickup to stop them from squealing by rubbing against each other.
I wonder how many pickups Eddie ruined by dipping in
apparently
too hot of a wax.
Too hot of a wax, and it melts the wires that are in the pickup, sure. And I think he actually mentioned that he did actually destroy a few pickups doing it till he figured out the right temperature and where it's not too cold where it doesn't seep in, and it's not too hot and it doesn't melt the wires. So that's something that is going on in the passive pickup world. But now pretty much everybody that creates passive pickups, they already pot them for you. So you don't have to worry about that step anymore.
And that's, another, for want of a better phrase here, but a signature sound of certainly passive single coil pickups
is what?
Where we tend
Squealing?
to get a lot of hum and noise and things with those as well. If we're at a certain volume or just, 60 or 50 cycle hum, depending on what part of the world you're living.
Sure.
And we all know that sound, and we all strive to get rid of it, don't we?
Strive? Who even bothers to even start it in the first place? Just kidding. And that's why they invented the humbucker pickup, is to have two of them going counter to each other, which would increase the volume output of the pickup. But at the same time, because they were running in opposite directions of their current flow, that allows them to negate noise that's introduced into the signal from the pickup itself.
Yep.
So bing, bang, boom. And with that, we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors. All right, we're back. And before we just get kicking on to the next step, I just want to remind everybody, head on over to InsideTheRecordingStudio.com and sign up for our email list. You get some goodies, and there's some cool stuff coming down the road. So get on it. All right, what's next, Chris? What do we got?
Well, next up, we got the counterpoint active pickups. So why would anybody want active pickups, and how are they different?
Well, my guess is that when it's active, you're not going to get as much noise out of the pickup, but I could be wrong.
No, that's true. They tend to be generally a lot more quiet. It almost seems a little bit counterintuitive how, at least it does to me, how this is actually achieved, because most people, and I count myself included in this until relatively recently, I was always thinking about active pickups as sort of like a higher output type of pickup. And sure, that can be the sound that can be there as well. It's the construction of the pickup that changes.
How so?
It actually has fewer coils in it.
Or fewer wrappings of the wire you're referring to.
Yeah, exactly. The wrappings around the coils. And what that has the effect on it, that it's actually less of an output as opposed to the passive counterpart, which is then, of course, boosted by a preamp, which is powered by usually one 9-volt battery.
Yes.
So what that does, it's almost, I guess you can kind of think about it as, well, we've been talking about gain staging.
Sure.
We have, in the days of tape, going in as hot as possible to minimize noise, right? Where in the active pickup, that is less. This is, okay, stay with me. This is a weird comparison.
I'm going on the road. I'm with you. I'm in the car.
Yeah. But with the active pickup, we have less output that is less noisy, but it is then boosted up more of the clean signal so that you get the output level that is required, but less noise.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
That is at least how I understand how that comes about.
Sure.
So what this does is obviously gives us a quieter pickup that we could potentially run hotter if we so desire. So
one other thing that I think that they tend to do is they voice the electronics to allow the output of the pickup to remain consistent no matter what the volume level is. And what I mean by output being consistent is you're not losing high end. It's not changing the characteristic of the pickup based on the volume.
That's right. That's right. And some people would argue that that is a negative, and some would argue that it's a positive, that you retain the same sound, essentially.
I'm going to argue it's just a taste thing based on what your needs are.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. There with you. It just comes down to playing style. Now, if you are one of those players that you have a habit of sort of shaping your tone as you're playing,
sure,
then I can see how, well, that's not doing that anymore. I'm losing that. So that would be a certain detriment. But if you're not, well, then you're still going to have the same amount of, same type of tone, regardless of that. You just obviously softer.
Right. And there's one other thing to think about when it comes to having active pickups here.
Mm-hmm.
And that is they require the battery, which we didn't say that was required, but obviously active pickups require a battery or a power source for them to work, which means for the most part, if your pickups are entirely active and the battery is dead and you go to plug in.
No bueno.
You get no sound. Yeah, no bueno. It's not good. You get nothing. You get no sound. However, there are guitars that are wired in such a way that their active electronics can be bypassed if need be. So you can still get sound without the active capability. I know this because I have 2 guitars that do this.
That's pretty cool.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever played a guitar that has that. I just know that every once in a while you sit
Oh, contraire. You have played a guitar that has it. You just didn't know it.
Ooh, pray tell more. Which one is that?
The one I was showing you that has the custom
Strat that you have?
My old original first guitar Strat that is a Seymour Duncan custom, a single humbucker in the bridge position in the slightly skewed mode that Fenders tend to have at their bridge position. That is a passive pickup. But inside the guitar itself, I picked up this kit while going to music school that allowed me to wire it into this volume knob that had a push-pull pot to it. And when you pull the pot out, it adds a mid boost. So you get a little bit more cranky, mid, gut punchy kind of vibe out of the sound, in addition to a slight volume boost as well. And if you really want to change that, there's a little knob inside the electronics where you can say, oh, I want this much gain when I pull the knob out, kind of thing.
That's cool.
Yes. Yeah. And what's really cool about it is even with a battery not plugged in, it still operates as a passive pickup. But when there is a battery hooked up to it and I pull that thing out, it will operate as an active pickup doing the boost when I have that. I also have a Don Grosh nylon string electric guitar. Mm-hmm. And that guitar has active electronics as well. But it doesn't require them to be on in order for it to work. Actually, I take that back. My bass is the same way. My bass has the same ability. It has a battery in it, but if I don't flip it on to make it active, it will still operate in passive mode. So not all guitars are one or the other. You can get pickups that will work both as passive and active pickups. Crazy.
Do you notice any, when you're playing those, or were you tracking or you're recording with them or however you're playing them, do you notice a tonal difference whether you're going active or passive, besides the, let's say, on your bass? If you're not talking about a boosting type of thing here, do you notice a tonal difference?
Yes, I do, especially with the nylon string Grosh. With the active electronics on, it actually sounds much more rich, I guess would be the best way to say it, because it's really providing a whole lot more to the bottom end than with it not on. So yes, with that guitar particularly, yes. With the other one where I added the mid boost active ability to the Seymour Duncan custom that I have, that is noticeable when it's on. But if I were to turn that boost off and I were to take the battery on or off, the tonal difference is negligible. I probably wouldn't even be able to hear it unless I was really like nerding out for hours to try and hear the subtle differences that are happening there. But the mid boost and volume boost that it gives is very substantial. Oh, sure. So, I mean, that's obvious when it's on. But when that's
actually a cool
off,
thing that is in the, probably on more, but in the current Steve Lukather models from Ernie Ball Music Man.
Right.
There's also one of those boost functions in.
It's probably the same thing. It probably doesn't require the battery, and without the battery, it doesn't do the boost, right? But you still get sound.
That's correct. The new, I think it's version 3 on, they are passive pickups. Whereas the one that I have, which is the original one, which is version 1, that they're the active EMGs in there.
Gotcha.
So,
and then, as I mentioned slightly earlier at the outset of talking about the pickups, there's a new brand, or a new breed, I should say, of active pickups. And it's not based on the traditional magnets and copper wires. Instead, it's circuit boards and circuits. Mm-hmm. And that is the Fishman Fluence pickups. They are an entirely different breed that operate in a whole different ballpark, I guess would be the best way to say it. Because as active pickups, as they go, if the Fishman Fluence pickups do not have power, you get no sound. And that's the same with any pickup that's an active pickup that is only active pickups. So there are EMGs that are that way. Like if you do not have the battery, you get no sound. But that's the same thing with the Fishman Fluence. Now, the wonderful thing about the Fluence pickups is with single coils, there is zero noise, like literally none. There's no hum, there's no buzzing, there's no noise. It is like ridiculously quiet, and it's a single coil pickup. The other thing that's really amazing about the Fishman Fluence is that they can shape the tonal characteristic however they please. So with the setup that I have in the Strat that I've got, I have 2 different Strat sounds. Now, like active pickups, when I change the volume knob, that means nothing. It's not changing. It's just the volume level is changing. It's not reacting like a passive pickup would. But when the tone knob is pulled out, you switch the voicing, and it can go from the standard Strat style sound of the original Strat coil, single coil pickups to the Texas Heat, as they were called. And I think that comes from the Stevie Ray Vaughan. So it's got a bit more bite. It's got a bit more oomph to the sound that you don't get from a standard Strat single coil. So it has 2 different voicings in it, and it can change at the drop of a hat by just switching the knob. And it's pretty badass. And that's...
Yeah, that is really cool. I mean, even without that, just having a silent Strat with single coils.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That in itself is awesome.
Which, you're going to be hard-pressed to go into any kind of studio that's going to have fluorescent lighting. They're not going to do that. A smart studio does not put fluorescent lighting in their rooms. And when you're recording at home, maybe you have fluorescent lights around and that's why you're getting that hum. Or maybe you have a television or something that's emitting some sort of magnetic energy that it's going to provide hum for you, which is why you're having trouble getting rid of it. Get that kind of stuff out of your recording room. It's not necessary. Don't bring it in. Don't do it. But with the Fluence pickups, you don't have to worry about it. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And even with, traditional single coils, if you are in, let's say, a utopian environment, you're still going to get some noise from that. There's just
and it's the noise that cycles through from just being plugged in to an amplifier that is plugged into a wall outlet, because if you're in America, I believe it is the 60 cycle hum, and if you're in Europe, it is the 50 cycle hum. So those are based on how the DC currents work. Kind of thing with the AC currents that happen from your amplifiers. So what kind of pickup is best, Chris? I mean, is there one that's like yay, nay, or like what do you say?
Absolutely. There's you should never ever use a passive pickup. You should only use active.
Okay.
No, of course I'm being facetious here. There really is no better or worse. There's no right. There's no wrong. It is only up to your playing style and ultimately what sound you like.
Well,
I have guitars with passive pickups. I have guitars with active pickups, and I just like to hear what I hear. Right. So,
sure. When I picked up that cheap ass Strat,
yes,
the pickups that came with it, garbage.
Well, sure.
Which is why I stuck the Fluence in there, and it now sounds like, I think I've mentioned it on the podcast before, saying, I've got the engine of like a McLaren inside the body of maybe Pinto, Yugo, Pinto, something like that. But it plays great, and it's a Strat, and it sounds like a Strat, and it really sounds like a Strat having those Fluence pickups in there. So it's the most mind-blowing technology that I've heard of in pickup technology in a long time, and it is active. So if there is no power, then you're shit out of luck. But the nice thing is that the battery pack, that if you buy one with it's lasts for a very, very long time. And one thing that probably should be mentioned in terms of active pickups and the battery stuff is don't leave your guitar plugged in to the cable when you're not playing it. That is just
indeed
not a smart move, because you come back the next day and you're wondering, why do I have no sound? And it's because you left the guitar plugged in, fucking battery's dead.
Yeah, because the battery doesn't know if you're playing or not. It's just like, hey, there's a cable here. Let's start working. So
what was that? Honey Badger don't give a shit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Your guitar battery don't give a shit.
Yeah, your guitar battery is a Honey Badger. It doesn't give a shit. Now, one knock that, I don't know if you know this, Jody, but guitarists have a tendency to be a little bit more of a purist in the mindset. Did you know that guitar players actually are kind of like attitude-driven creatures?
I think I grew out of that out of the womb.
Did you? Well, good. You're the one.
So, maybe.
Yeah, you're the one. No, but the reason I bring that up is because, I mean, players will always have strong feelings about, whatever the side of the fence that they tend to come down on.
Well, sure.
And one of those things is there might be a feeling of like, well, active pickups are only for like metal players and players that play with like really high gainy kind of sound. Now, just the fact that you brought up the pickups in your Strats proves that that's just not right. That's just not accurate. Well, so I think there is a stigma, and there are, of course. Well, I mean,
there's always
if
stigmas.
You want, and I mean, if you're going for like an Eber sort of like modern metal type of a sound, there's going to be more than a few choices for you in the active domain, right?
Sure.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that. I mean, there are guys like one of my favorite players I mention a lot. It's like Steve Lukather. He used to play EMGs for the longest time.
Yep.
I believe Vince Gill did as well. And even Dave Gilmour had his own set of like EMGs at one point in either like late or mid 80s to early 90s perhaps.
And there's a guy who said he could walk into any store, plug into any amp, and essentially sound like himself after a few minutes of fiddling with knobs.
Right. So for him, it was probably one of those things that, well, I just got to get rid of the noise here.
Sure.
And he was able to get that. So I think that stigma can sort of be put to bed. It really is just kind of like, well, what do you like to play through? And are you getting the sound that you want?
Well, here's one thing that I will say. I've noticed this with some active pickups. They tend to sound less punchy, and they can have a kind of compressed vibe to them. Like they already are compressing at the source of the sound, so to speak. And I can understand why that is not desirable. I get that.
I would agree with that. I think,
but I don't think all active pickups are like that, and that may just be the case of like early active pickups. They may not all be like that anymore. There might be some that do it. All I care about is if when I go to get a pickup, is like, am I getting the tone that I want? Yes, then I want that pickup. That's all I care about. So
yeah, wholeheartedly agree. But I do think that's also a critique that you would hear, and I think that there is some truth to that. I think that they could be a little bit more, or they could be at least, let's say, processed sounding.
Well, they are.
That you're right, and you wouldn't have necessarily the same sort of pick attack or anything compared to a passive pickup.
Well, yeah, and the reason for that is you're running it through a bunch of circuits before you even hit the amp. So yeah, that's an agreeable statement, and it's not a false statement, but is it a wrong statement? No, not necessarily, because as long as you're getting the tone that you're looking for, that's all that matters.
Yeah, so it just comes down to like your playing style again. I don't really think about it twice when I go and I'm tracking something with EMGs in it, and then I switch to something else that might have like a Tom Anderson or DiMarzio pickup, anything. It's just sound. Yes. It's just sound. So as long as it sounds good, that's what you should use.
There is one other difference.
Pricing.
Yes.
Yeah, active pickups tend to be a little bit more pricey. But that, again, that is very much dependent on what end of the spectrum of passive pickups that you're looking at.
Sure.
Are you going with, let's say, a pair of super cheap replacement pickups for a Strat compared to something from, let's say, I don't know, bare knuckle pickups or something? There's quite a price range there, right? As a whole, probably a fair statement to say that active can have a little bit higher price point.
You want to know one little interesting factoid?
I can't wait to hear that factoid.
Okay. Generally speaking, most pickup manufacturers hire women to do the winding.
Is that right?
Yes. And there's a reason for it. And I had no idea until I had an endorsement with a company that said, this is why we do it. The reason why they do it is because women tend to have smaller fingers, which makes it easier for them to work in the smaller spaces that are confined in a pickup.
I would be an excellent pickup winder then, because I have hands like a 10-year-old
You have a future.
Girl.
You have a future.
Something to fall back upon.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, but that's interesting because now, of course, her name escapes me, but there was a lady that used to work at the Fender factory, I believe, and people would request her. I want her to
wind it,
wind my pick. Yeah.
Well, when I had a custom wind on a 7-string single coil stacked humbucker for a 7-string guitar that I had made, it was wound by somebody specifically at Seymour Duncan because she was the only one that, one, I trusted, and two, she knew the sound. So.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
So it's not just Fender, it's all kinds of places. And people probably just don't realize, it has to do with the fact that they have smaller fingers on the average.
Well, look at that. I've learned yet another thing today.
Right. There's useless trivia for Jeopardy for you right there. With that being said, what is your favorite pickup? Is it passive or is it active? What is it? Do you have one?
I don't have one.
You don't have
No, one? I really don't. I mean, I have EMG 85s and a couple with EMG single coils. I have guitars that have Duncan hot rails and cool rails in there. Mm-hmm. As mentioned, I have guitars that have DiMarzio pickups. I have a Transition in one of my favorite guitars right now.
So you got a combination of all kinds of things.
Yeah. No, I don't really have, I'm not the guy that has like, okay, I got to have this pickup.
Right.
I'm fortunate that I have a few guitars that I can have guitars that just provide me with the sound that I might need for session work or whatever. It's like I need something different. So I get some tonal flexibility with that. So I don't really have, a favorite. What about you? Do you have, I know you're high on your Fishman influence there, but
yeah, I'm going to go on a limb and say that if there is one pickup that I've used more than any other, it is the modified version of a Seymour Duncan custom.
Cool.
Which is a strange name because it's a custom. When you think about it, the reason for that is because I have an endorsement with Seymour Duncan. So it's like, I haven't gone so far as to say, hey, let's make a Jody Whitesides model, because as narcissistic as I am, I still have not done that.
You got a little bit of pride.
Well, it's not so much pride as it is. It's like, I don't have a big enough name, unfortunately. And I think Seymour Duncan would just be like, no. But they are very kind to me. And yes, in terms of the pickups with the Fishman has also been very kind to me. And their Fluence pickups in terms of just technology just blows me away. And it's just like, wow. So I know that in the future, I will probably switch out a couple of the guitars that I have from the Seymour Duncans that I have to put some Fluence in there, just to give me a little bit more variety on the tones in terms of what I've got in different guitars. There it is.
Yeah. No, it's a beautiful thing because, the technology that you mentioned there with the Fishman Fluence. Now, this is starting to sound a lot like an ad for them, but it
So
really
shut
isn't. Yeah, but it is really fascinating, I think, because of what that will give us as tonal options in the future.
Yes.
Now, just having two in one guitar is great. You only see where the end goal could be with that, right?
Sure.
You know, I'm sure there's no limit with how much you can go with that. And I suppose you can get to down the road where it's just too many tonal options and you end up losing yourself. But it's, you know, it's fascinating. It's a lot. It's a little bit like collecting amp sims, right?
Right.
It's like, oh, I've got too many options now. Guitar players, we tend to like to search for that ultimate tone, right?
If there is such a thing for a player,
yeah,
yes, there
and that
is.
just depends on what day that you're playing, right? And what you're looking for. There are also players that just like, no, this is my pickup. I love this. This is what I'm using. And if you found that, awesome, great. The difference between passive and active, I think it's there. There's benefits and drawbacks from both, I suppose. I would never say that one is better than the other.
Well, there it is. You've just wrapped a bow on it. So why don't we jump on over to Friday Finds? And what have you got, Chris?
I got stunned actually this week.
Stunned? Like you were hit with a Star Trek phaser set to stun? What are you talking about?
Yes, it felt like that because I had not heard any sort of gurgling or anything about this coming out. And Native Instruments have an updated version of Action Strings.
Action Strings?
Appropriately enough, Action Strings 2.
Ooh.
And
it's not one, it's two.
Yeah. And it looks really, really cool. It's supposedly completely rewritten. And you can now have a lot more control. You can adjust the phrases that are being played.
Cool.
There's a lot more tweakability. Just go check it out on the website. But that had me
what
kind
you're
of
saying
excited.
is that you're going to go to Native Instruments and open up your wallet and say, here, take my money.
I might. Depends on. Now, that being said, I haven't written so much of the type of music that I used to do when I got
Action Strings 1 in the first place, yeah.
So, but it certainly made me go, that looks really interesting. And it does. It looks really, really cool. So
things that make you go,
Indeed. What about you? What made you go,
Well, it didn't make me go, It made me go, mind expanded, mind ready to creep right out of my skull.
Oh, that's big.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of a thing. And it is a Universal Audio, and I would be remiss not to even mention it because it was kind of big news this week. And that is Universal Audio with their Luna DAW have released an update that adds the ability, if you desire to purchase it and you're using Universal Audio stuff, API Vision Console channels. Essentially, you can turn Luna into an API desk. You get the standard board EQ, which I believe is the 510. And then there is the parametric style EQ that you can switch it to, which I believe is the 550. And to top it off, it comes with its own channel fader strip instead of the old volume knob on what is now the legacy Vision channel. To top it off, it also comes bundled with the 2500 compressor and the API summing bus. And an API
they give you the summing bus with that.
They give you the summing bus, the 2500 compressor, the API pre, and then the Vision channel strip with the two different EQ switch abilities in it. It's pretty intense, and the fact that you can turn the Luna into what looks like an API desk, so to speak, inside Luna, it's like, that's kind of badass. That is the mind-expanding, mind-blowing concept that UA has unleashed upon us this past week.
That is pretty cool. That looks really, really interesting.
Yes, it certainly does. And I get the feeling that somewhere down the road, they're going to do it for variable different console boards. They're going to end up doing this so that you can choose whatever console it is that you're planning on mixing on, and then you can mix and match if you so desire. So it's pretty cool.
Now, that's cool. That reminds me of an old episode you and I did. And you asked me it was something to the effect of what would be one thing that you would dream up that doesn't exist yet. And that is essentially that ability to turn your DAW into having the characteristics of different consoles just right there
right
in the mix
then and
without loading plugins. That is really, really cool. And I'm sure, like I said, I'm sure that's where they're heading with that, with
yes,
with the UA systems. Yeah.
I don't doubt it. Does that mean you're now thinking like, will I go to UA?
Now, it makes me sound like I am totally anti-UA, which I'm absolutely not. I think they do absolutely great stuff. It's just that I'm not ready to, do a lateral move with that at this point.
I hear you.
But it's great stuff, man. It's great stuff. So who knows what the future holds, man.
That's right. So while we've got your attention, we would like to ask you to go to the website and leave us a review at insidetherecordingstudio.com/review. I believe it's also just a little button that you can push right there on the website. And that allows you to send a review either to Apple Podcasts or to Podchaser, which are the two that we know about right now. If you are listening on a platform that allows for reviews, let us know. We'll add it to our reviews page. You can also sign up for the email list. Doing so will get you some free plugin settings from Chris and I. In addition to that, you'll get weekly reminders about the Tuesday tips that we've just released and the most recent episodes of the podcast that you're listening to because you love it so much. And if you would like, you can send an email to goldstar, GOLDSTAR, at insidetherecordingstudio.com with the word pickups, and you'll get something back in your inbox. That is pretty cool. If you have a topic of suggestion for Chris and I to pontificate upon, like last week's episode, you can reach us at the contact page, and we'll put it into consideration for the podcast in a future episode. And with that, I'm going to say, we'll spout at you next week.
Have a good one, Jody.